My abusive ex threatened every man who looked at me until I started dating a 6'5" MMA fighter, and he finally backed down. The court stepped in, and I took my life back with real receipts and calm revenge. I was 27 when I finally walked out of the apartment I had shared with Trevor Holt and left behind the version of myself that apologized for everything. I carried a single suitcase, a banker's box full of sketch pads and hard drives, and a guilt that did not belong to me. Leaving did not mean the danger was gone. It simply changed shape. Trevor no longer grabbed my wrist or blocked the door. He started haunting spaces I could not control. He became the shadow that fell across other people. The first week on my own, a clerk at the neighborhood market complimented my canvas tote and asked if I had designed the print. I told him yes, and felt normal for 15 seconds. By evening, the clerk had a bruise on his cheekbone and a manager who quietly told him to take 2 days off. I never proved it was Trevor, but I knew. The second incident happened at the bus stop on Burnside. A stranger asked what time the next line would arrive, and I showed him the posted schedule. That night, Trevor texted from an unknown number to let me know he had taken down a license plate. He wished the man good luck with his tires. I blocked the number and changed my route. I stopped talking to men in public. I learned to look at the ground when the world around me contained faces he might not like. I filed for a restraining order. He was too careful. The harassment skirted the edge of the law. I kept a log anyway. I saved receipts, timestamps, screenshots, and even the blank spaces where the cameras did not reach. My best friend Nora begged me to come live on her couch. My mother sent me rental listings back home in St. Louis. I told both of them that Portland was mine, and I would not let him take my city, too. At work, I built interfaces for a small nonprofit and pretended the calm of clean grids could become the calm of my life. At night, I ate dinner standing up and watched the lock on my door as if I could hold it shut by concentration alone. 3 months later, my laptop died in the middle of a deadline. The screen went black. The fan clicked into silence. I sat there in an empty office with a donor demo due at 9 the next morning and understood I had to leave my fortress. I found a repair lab on Hawthorne through a quick search and walked over, holding the machine like a wounded bird. The bell over the door chirped as I stepped inside the tiny space that smelled like solder and coffee. The man behind the counter looked like he had been built by a craftsman who preferred generous measurements. He was tall in a way that changed the geometry of the room. Wide shoulders, a nose that had clearly met force before, a small white scar near his left ear that gave his smile a soft twist. He wore a faded black tee under a shop apron and greeted me with a warmth that could not be faked. He asked what happened. I told him. He asked when I needed it. I said yesterday. He held the laptop, weighed it, listened to it as if machines could whisper. He told me he could try a new drive and a data transfer. He asked me to get a tea next door and promised he would give me news in an hour. I wanted to warn him not to be too kind. I wanted to say that kindness landed men with flat tires, that courtesy became risk around me, that someone out there collected grievances and settled them with vandalism and threats. I swallowed the warning. I said thank you. I walked out into winter light and tried to breathe for 60 minutes without imagining consequences. When I returned, he had my files booted on a temporary setup. He said the drive had been failing for a long time and that the timing was unlucky. He said he could finish the transfer by closing and would only charge me for parts. I slid my card across the counter. He slid a small business card back. Rafael Costa, Device Lab. On the sidewalk, I looked both ways as if I were crossing a highway. Trevor did not appear. The next day, my laptop ran better than it had in 2 years. I wrote a thank you email. I signed it with the careful politeness of a woman who does not want to open doors she is not ready to guard. I did not expect a reply. At lunch, Rafael sent a short message saying he was glad it helped. He added a line about the best banh mi in the neighborhood as if that were a fact worth sharing with any customer. It was a normal message, and normal frightened me. A week later, I went for a run along the river after work, the kind of cold evening where the sky is silver, and the water looks like it remembers storms. Near the footbridge, a man jogged past, then slowed, then lifted a hand in recognition. It was Rafael, out of the apron, in a long-sleeve shirt and running shoes, hair damp with sweat. He asked if I minded company for a few minutes. I did the calculus of risk and reward and found myself nodding. We ran in silence. I noticed that he kept a comfortable distance, as if he understood how much space strangers should give each other to breathe. At the far end of the loop, we stopped to stretch. He told me he had grown up in Recife and moved to Oregon as a teenager, that he fought in mixed martial arts with a small team across the river, and that the lab paid the bills between fights. He asked about my work. I told him about designing forms people would not abandon, about persuading users without manipulating them. He said it sounded like a gentle kind of problem solving. He did not ask for my number. He said that if I ever needed a quick repair, I could cut the line and come straight to the back. He said to take care, and then he ran off. Trevor materialized again 2 days later in the reflection of the deli case at the grocery store. I felt the cold radiate from my palms as I picked up a carton of eggs. He smiled and walked away. On the sidewalk, he brushed shoulders with a man who had smiled at me in the produce aisle and hissed something that made the man flinch. I left without bread. That night I wrote to Raphael. I told him I had an ex who monitored my life like a game he intended to win. I told him it was better if we did not talk. I told him I was sorry. Raphael replied an hour later. He said he was sorry for what I had been through. He said he respected whatever boundary I needed. He added one last sentence that I read 3 times. You do not have to protect me from being decent to you. I closed my laptop and cried on my kitchen floor because the world still contained people who said things like that. I did not see Trevor for 3 weeks. It felt like someone took a pressure cuff off my lungs. Nora dragged me to an art walk on Alberta, and I let myself speak to a gallery owner about a print. The next morning, my car was fine. The gallery windows were fine. No flat tires, no broken locks. It made no sense. A few days later, I found out why. Raphael told me months afterward that Trevor had walked into the lab early one morning before the open sign flipped. He had waited outside until Raphael moved the sandwich board to the sidewalk, then stepped in behind him. He had leaned on the counter and explained that he liked to keep things tidy. He had described the little ways he punished men who gave me attention. He had asked Raphael to agree to stay away from me. Raphael listened and recognized the kind of man who used fear as currency. He asked Trevor whether he minded if there were witnesses. Then he walked to the open door, turned the sign to closed, and locked it. He told Trevor calmly that any visit to my building, any text, any drive past my block, would trigger a police report and a call to a lawyer who specialized in harassment. He told him he had cameras, and he had time. He told him the team he trained with included a detective who sparred on Tuesdays and a woman who taught self-defense classes to college students and happened to love filing paperwork. He made sure Trevor understood that cause and effect would be real. Trevor said nothing and left. I learned all of that the night Raphael took me for late pho on a rainy Tuesday and admitted he had not been entirely transparent about the lab visit because he did not want to make me feel small or indebted. He was right to hold it back at first. When he told me, I did not feel small. I felt the shape of my life expand. We started seeing each other on purpose. Coffee, a thrift store crawl where he found a leather jacket with history, and I found a yellow ceramic bowl shaped like a grin. A Saturday morning at the practice space where his team drilled footwork lines in chalk, and I sat in the corner with a sketchbook, watching how he focused the size of his body into something quiet and precise. He never made a joke at my expense. He never used my past as leverage. He walked on the street side of the sidewalk without announcing it. He listened when I told him that my panic attacks sometimes began with my hands tingling and my vision narrowing. He learned which signals meant I needed to leave, and which ones meant I needed to stay and hold onto his sleeve and feel the fabric. When he asked if I wanted to see one of his fights, I said yes, and heard my own voice steady. The venue was a converted warehouse with bleachers and a ring under white lights. The crowd roared at the violence and then forgot about it to go get nachos. I hated and loved it. I watched someone blast through a double leg and someone else wrap a choke like a ribbon. In the second round of Raphael's bout, he slipped a right hand and landed a left hook that resonated in my ribs, though I was 10 rows back. He won by decision. He hugged coaches and teammates. When he reached me, he put his forehead to mine and breathed. I understood then that the discipline he spoke about on the Riverside Loop was not a line. It was his life. We began to build a home without quite meaning to. His apartment above the lab was small and loud. My place had a view of a parking lot and 3 bars that competed to outshout one another. We found a duplex with creaky floors and a backyard fig tree owned by a retired mail carrier named Mr. Alvarez. He told us he wanted tenants who brought steadiness to the block. He said he preferred people who watered plants and minded one another. Rafa joked that I was the plant waterer and he was the minder. We painted the living room a color called soft wheat. We bought a couch from a family who were moving to Boise and delivered it ourselves up the narrow stairs with 6 rests and 1 scrape on Raphael's forearm. He insisted, made the couch official. We invited Nora for dinner and tried to make the small place feel like a promise. My first panic attack with him arrived at a music festival in the park, after a man in a flannel shirt brushed my shoulder, and my nervous system decided the past was present. I walked away from the crowd and sat behind a row of food trucks, counting breaths and losing count. Raphael found me and did not ask me to explain. He sat on the pavement beside me and put his palm on the concrete, then asked me to put my palm on his so I would feel something solid through the ground. When the shaking slowed, he told me about his first competition at 19, about how he could not hear his coach over the noise, about how he learned to carry a quiet place inside his chest. The next week, I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Amara Patel, who did not ask me for scenes of horror but asked for scenes of relief. She taught me the texture of calm so I could recognize it when I found it in short pieces. In early spring, I received a message on social media from someone I did not know. Her name was Hannah Lee. She wrote that a mutual acquaintance told her I had dated Trevor and that she wanted to ask me a question she feared she already knew the answer to. She said he had a pattern of jealousy that he framed as devotion. She said her phone sometimes behaved strangely, as if another set of eyes lived inside it. She asked if I would meet. I felt the old fear rise and the new anger settle under it. I told her yes. We met at a tea shop where the ceiling was hung with paper cranes. Hannah was 23, with a cautious smile and a tremor in her hand that stilled whenever she laughed. I told her what I knew. I told her what I had learned. I told her not to wait until she had proof that satisfied anyone but herself. She thanked me with a voice that sounded both raw and determined. 2 days later, she ended it. That night, Trevor idled his sedan outside her building for an hour. Raphael and I arrived together. He parked across the street and walked up to the driver's side window with his hands visible, and his voice even. I watched from half a block away with my phone in my pocket, recording. Trevor sat for 1 long minute, eyes fixed forward, then pulled away without a word. He did not see Hannah's neighbor filming from a second-floor window. We saved the footage. We saved dates and times. The next morning, Raphael introduced me to a woman named Sienna Brooks, a private investigator who trained at his gym twice a week and wrote meticulous reports with exhibits labeled like a law school exam. Sienna said patterns win these cases. She asked for names. I gave her mine. She found 2 more within a month. Amber was a barista whose manager quietly shifted her to late shifts after her tires were slashed in daylight. Lee was a dental assistant who had learned to carry her pepper spray in her palm, as if it were a talisman. We met in a conference room at the nonprofit where I worked on a Saturday when the office was empty. Sienna took statements while I made tea. We kept our voices level and our notes exact. We were building a shape that the law could recognize. Raphael had a title fight on the calendar by summer. It was the biggest opponent he had ever faced, a wrestler with a reach that turned the ring into a map he owned. I watched Raphael run hill sprints and hit pads and watch tape, and learned to move like a man who refused to back straight up. He cut weight slowly. He slept like a soldier between campaigns. He asked me once, late in the evening when the city had quieted, if I was afraid of what it meant to love someone who stepped into harm on purpose. I told him the truth. I told him I was afraid every time I saw his hands shake after sparring when the adrenaline left his body. I told him I was also afraid of living small forever. He took my hand and did not make a promise he could not keep. He stayed for the quiet until sleep found us both. The night of the fight, the warehouse felt like an engine. Chants rose and collapsed. Old men held beers and argued about footwork as if they had ever thrown a jab. A kid in a team jacket paced 2 rows down, whispering prayers. In round 1, Raphael circled away from the power hand and stabbed jabs that did not land clean but made space. In round 2, he got taken down, sprang up, got dragged again, built a base, stood, and the crowd swelled when he freed a knee. In round 3, he fainted, and the other man bit. Raphael stepped in and landed a left to the body that folded his opponent for a heartbeat. He followed with a right hand that found the jaw. The man fell. The referee counted. When the bell rang, Raphael looked directly at me, not at the photographers, not at the bright ceiling, and he smiled with a kind of relief that had nothing to do with violence, and everything to do with being seen by the person he wanted to see him. Afterward, we drove to our duplex with takeout and silence. He stood in the kitchen, wrapped in a towel with an ice pack on his ribs. He pulled something small from the pocket of his coat on the chair. It was a ring with a simple band and a stone that looked like a drop of the Willamette on a clear day. He did not kneel. He did not give a speech. He told me he wanted a life with me that felt like showing up at the same door again and again, and finding the same face and feeling the same ease. I said yes. We ate noodles on the couch and called Nora. We told Mr. Alvarez the next morning, and he clapped like a man who loved a good ending in the middle of the book. Sienna's file grew thicker. She reached out to the county office and connected with a prosecutor named Melissa Grant, who had a patient voice and a spine made of steel. Melissa met with each of us and explained the difference between a protective order and a criminal charge, between documentation and rumor, between fear that lives in the body and fear that can be shown to a judge. She asked whether we would testify if needed. We said yes because saying no felt like letting the past eat the future. The hearing for a protective order came 2 weeks after our small backyard wedding. We married under the fig tree with string lights and 6 tables borrowed from Nora's church. My mother cried slowly, which means joy has finally outrun worry. Raphael's teammates brought Caesar salad that could feed an army. Mr. Alvarez gave a toast about male roots and good neighbors. We danced to a playlist Nora made that lurched from soul to old bossa nova to a song Raphael's father used to play on a beaten guitar in Recife. At midnight, I took off my shoes and stood on the grass with my new husband, holding my hand, and I understood that safety can be a place you build together. At the courthouse, Melissa sat with us in a long corridor that smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. Trevor arrived in a clean shirt and a blank expression. He walked as if the floor might betray him. He stared at no one. He had a lawyer who spoke in a tone that implied none of this should count. We filed into the small room. The judge listened while Melissa laid out the pattern. Sienna's diagrams turned months into lines of incidents. Dates linked to addresses. Statements linked to screenshots. We did not embellish. We did not speculate. When it was my turn to speak, my voice broke on the first sentence, and then found its footing. I said that Trevor had taught me to stare at the ground. I said that I wanted to look it up again. The judge granted the protective order. She warned that any violation would trigger immediate consequences. Trevor did not look at me when he left. He looked smaller than he had ever allowed himself to appear. The months that followed were quieter. Raphael signed a small contract with a promotion based in Seattle. We drove north for bouts and ate clam chowder in paper cups at the market. He won 2, then lost one by decision that felt wrong to everyone except the judges. In the hotel after that loss, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. I told him he was not his record, that he was not a sum of wins, that the way he cared about the kids who came to the gym on Saturday mornings mattered more than any belt. He let that truth into the room and nodded. In the mirror, I watched his shoulders release a fraction. We went home and made pancakes for dinner. That tasted like relief. One afternoon in late autumn, I was in line at a bakery when a man in front of me turned and told me he liked the design on my tote. I said thank you and did not feel danger blooming in my throat. I walked outside with a croissant and a coffee and realized my body had not braced for impact. I stood under a maple tree and let flakes of pastry fall onto the sidewalk. And I did not apologize for the mess because the wind was already carrying it away. Sienna called that evening to say that the district attorney's office had reviewed enough to file charges for stalking and harassment. Melissa asked whether we would stand again, this time in a room that would hold a trial if it came to it. I said I would. Hannah said she would. Amber said she would. Lee said she would. 2 other women Melissa had found through a line in a police report said they would. Facing the prospect of a case he could not control by intimidation, Trevor accepted a plea that kept him away from us for years and sent him into mandatory counseling that might or might not matter. Sometimes justice arrives the way water does in a desert, not as a flood, but as a slow, generous seep. That night, Raphael and I took 2 folding chairs to the park and sat under the bridge that hums when trucks pass. He talked about his father, a man who had hands big enough to palm a grapefruit and a laugh that made other men pick up the tune. He said when his father died, he carried anger like a hot stone for years. Fighting taught him how to place it down without forgetting its heat. I told him, Doctor. Patel had asked me last week what I feared most now that the emergency had eased. I had told her I was afraid happiness would always feel borrowed, that some part of me would wait for a price. Dr. Patel had told me that waiting for the price meant I had not yet learned to accept the gift. Raphael did not try to fix it. He listened. Then he asked whether I wanted to split a lemon bar. We did. I think about the beginning sometimes, about the night I stood in my kitchen with my back to a shut door and asked myself whether I could keep living like that. I think about a clerk with a bruise who told me to have a good day anyway. I think about Nora, who never said I told you so even when she had. I think about Mr. Alvarez watering the fig tree in late summer, about the way he hums under his breath when birds scold him from the fence. I think about Raphael running beside me on that winter loop, careful with distance, easy with breath, not once asking for anything I was not ready to give. I think about how strength looks from the outside, like bones and muscle, and looks from the inside, like steadiness and room. Trevor is no longer a chapter I reread to punish myself. He is a file folder in a cabinet I rarely open, a name that taught me how to see red flags before they wave, a cautionary tale I will share when someone younger than me thinks jealousy is proof of love. Love is not jealous. Love is space. Love is a rice cooker we both use, a Google Calendar we both edit without turning it into a scorecard, a hand that finds yours under a table when memories tangle your breath, a voice that says we can leave without asking anyone's permission. Love is a man who can end a fight and then spend an hour choosing apples because he likes the sound of the stems when they snap. On our first anniversary, we went back to the riverside path where we had run that winter day. The sky was the same bright gray. The water still looked like it kept secrets. We ran side by side, and I realized that my stride had changed since then. I no longer ran as if chased. I ran because my body loved rhythm. At the footbridge, we stopped. Raphael pressed his palm to the railing and closed his eyes. He said he was grateful. I said I was too. We walked home and made dinner. We watered the fig tree and left a bowl of water for the neighbor cat, who thinks our backyard is her vacation property. Later, we lay on the couch, my feet tucked under his thigh, a movie playing softly, the room filled with the quiet of people who have gathered their broken pieces and made something strong with the seams. I tell this story now for myself and for Hannah and for Amber and for Lee and for the women who will hear echoes in it and decide to step into a new life even if their hands shake. I tell it to say that fear can be loud but does not have to be final. I tell it to say that there are men like Raphael in the world, men who turn their strength into shelter rather than a weapon. I tell it to remind myself that the girl at the bus stop who checked the transit schedule for a stranger did nothing wrong, and that one day, long after you leave, you will look someone in the eye at a bakery, or on a train, or at a museum, and smile like a normal person and the world will not end. The morning after I realized that, I walked into Raphael's lab with a bag of empanadas from the food cart that sets up on the corner twice a week. He was bent over a phone with a cracked back and a stubborn battery tab. I set the bag beside his elbow. He looked up and grinned in that way that makes the room seem warmer. He asked how my day had been. I told him good. I told him I had given directions to a tourist near the bookstore, and nothing terrible had happened, not even a ripple in my pulse. He said that sounded like a win. I said it felt like one. We ate the empanadas on milk crates behind the shop while rain ticked on the awning, and I thought, this is what victory looks like. Not trumpets, not headlines, just ordinary peace-holding. There will be more hard days. There will be fights he does not win, and deadlines I miss, and forms that refuse to align no matter how I coax them. There will be memories with sharp edges. There will be worries that arrive uninvited and sit on the couch pretending they live here. We will show them the door. We will open windows. We will keep the cameras and the careful logs where they help us. And we will also keep the picnic blanket and the deck of cards and the list of free summer concerts. Because living well is part of the work. I can say now, without bargaining with the future, that I am happy. I am allowed to be. My name is Lila Nguyen. I am 28 now. I design things that help people move through systems with less friction. I water the fig tree. I run, even when it rains. I live with a man who can lift another man off his feet and can also recite lines from a cooking show with embarrassing accuracy. My ex learned that fear does not scale when women stand together. He is no longer the weather in my life. I am the weather in my life. Clear, then cloudy, then clear again, but always mine.